When he jumped off the podium, the dais at the Olympics, and they were walking past, and he ran past and ran up to the stadium where I was and put the medal around my neck and said, "Greg, this is yours." So there was a really special moment that I'll remember as somewhat of a career highlight. It wasn't my result, but it was definitely a part where, I can almost bring myself to tears, of emotional tears, where a mate sort of did that it was we did it together.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go.
Hey, it's Greg Bennett, multiple World Series champion, Australian Olympian, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Earshot's Bluetooth headphones for cyclists and runners who charge. The Physical Performance Show's upcoming live stream event with Rinny McGregor, Fueling for the Endurance Athlete, and Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist and exercise scientist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. Of course, we do this across a range of our different episodes, interest editions, catch-up episodes, coaches' corners, expert editions, and featured performers. Now, if you were tuning in this week for an expert edition with specialist psychiatrist Asha Khan on all things ADHD and sport, well, we've flipped the order by a week to bring you a conversation today with featured performer Greg Bennett. Now, at the time of this episode's release, we are just days away from the 2021/2020 Tokyo Olympic Games triathlon events. And we felt it fitting to share with you the highs, lows, and learnings from Greg Bennett's amazing 28-year career as a professional triathlete, as it involves stories about Olympic cycles, including the debut Triathlon Olympic Games in Sydney 2000 and Greg's narrow selection miss. Now, where do you start with an athlete like Greg Bennett's bio? As mentioned, Greg competed professionally across 28 years from the age of 18 to 44. And in that time, Greg has amassed a sporting resume like very few triathletes in history. Greg, to date, at least at the time of recording, is the highest placed male finisher in an Olympic Games event for Australia, finishing fourth at the Athens 2004 Olympic Games. In addition, Greg started 82 ITU World Cup events, won 6 of those, and was on the podium 23 times. Greg represented Australia at 13 World Championships at an elite level, 3 World Duathlon Championships with a silver medal in 2002, and 2 Goodwill Games. Greg won the world's richest ever triathlon prize purse in 2007 by clean sweeping 5 out of 5 for the Lifetime Fitness Grand Slam. And you'll hear Greg share around that incredible achievement on today's episode. In 2003 and 2007, Greg was voted Triathlete of the Year by Triathlete magazine. And in addition, Greg has been voted as a top 15 greatest triathlete of all time by Inside Triathlon magazine in 2012. In 2002 and 2003, Greg was the ITU World Cup Series overall champion. And you'll hear Greg share around today how he shifted his winning percentage from 7 to 8% pre-2005 to an incredible 40 to 50% win ratio from race starts beyond 2005. This episode is packed with highs, lows, and learnings. And you'll hear Greg touch on the power of absolute passion, why it's important to hone your craft through racing, the dark days of narrowly missing Sydney Olympic Games 2000 selection for the Australian triathlon team, and the surprising twist where Greg found himself with the gold medal around his neck only moments after the completion of the Sydney Olympic Games triathlon. Greg shares around why it is important to turn up and do the work every day, why something is better than nothing, and as Greg states week in and week out on his very own podcast, The Greg Bennett Show, show why it is that success comes to those who endure for just a moment more. There is so much in this episode. I know you are going to love it. There's a great physical challenge coming your way, Greg's top 3 tips for longevity, and an incredible story about the hardest training session Greg can recall. Here is my conversation with Greg Bennett, Australian Olympian, dual World ITU Series champion, on this Featured Performer episode. Greg Bennett, welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Wow, what a treat. Thanks for having me, Brad. I know it took us a few weeks to get the time right, me being here in Colorado and you in Brizzy, and finally we're connected.
Well, mate, you are up at 5:30 a.m. on a Friday morning while Laura, your wife, is at the gym, I believe. So full credit to you, Greg, for making the early rise.
Well, you'd understand, mate. Like, for me, my favourite time of day is this 4 till 7 a.m. The 2 kids are sound asleep, ideally, and I can get up and get my work done, and it's just a good time of day. My brain's usually functioning a little better, and it's just, so it worked out great. 5:30 for me is actually spot on, although my voice is probably a bit raspy as I'm still trying to wake up here.
It's go time for Greg Bennett. Well, Greg, as per your bio, I grew up in the 90s, inspired by yourself, the Brad Bevans, the Greg Welshes, the Miles Stewarts. You guys were taking the triathlon world by storm, and from my quick calculations, you may still be the highest placed Australian at an Olympic Games, finishing 4th there in 2004 Athens. Australian male, that is.
No,
male.
Let's be,
Yes.
The men, what are we doing, huh? It's like, I was reasonably pleased with my 4th at Athens with everything that I had going into it. I had about 8 weeks training after an Achilles injury, and we can probably touch on that later. My mindset going in probably wasn't ideal. I was a little hesitant, but look, when we look at the Australians, I think we've underperformed at the Olympics, especially back in 2000, 2004, and even 2008. I think as men, we were better performers on the world stage than we've shown at the Olympics. And then since, this Olympics coming up, we have someone like a Jake Birtwistle who's leading the charge for the men, and, will hopefully bring us home a medal. I think we need one. I think it's about time. And, the women, the Emmas have done fantastic. Emma Snowsill, Emma Moffat. And I think we can probably do well in the women there as well.
Yeah, and we at the time of recording, Greg, we are on the doorstep of Tokyo. It's been a long Olympic cycle.
I know, come on. I feel for the athletes. I don't know about you. Every Olympic athlete I've had as a guest on my show, I just feel for them. You see the young ones and they're loving the extra year. They're loving this. Okay, now I get to, find the sport. Someone like an American athlete like Morgan Pearson,
yes.
Who I just saw at the pool yesterday. And for him, that extra year, he started the sport in 2017, but now he's a definite medal contender. Had the Olympics been last year, I don't think we'd be talking about Morgan Pearson. But some of the athletes like Javier Gomez, he's 39 or whatever, hanging on for one more Olympic cycle, dragging it out for 5 years, or a Flora Duffy, who, is probably one of the favourites, a 5-year push. Just some of these athletes, I really feel for them.
It's another year changes everything, and we will see, Greg, and let's see if there is an Australian men's medal in the mix. It's going to be interesting. Greg, as per your bio, you raced for 28 years professionally, 500 professional races, 100 plus international wins, 82 ITU World Cup wins, 23
podiums, not wins.
85 ITU World Cups, 6 wins, 23 podiums.
Yeah.
There's very little. You represented Australia there for, I think it was 13 years straight, Greg, from 94 to 2010 at the elite Australian.
Yeah, it was a while. I loved the sport. I was passionate about the sport. That was where it was all. Before I was a professional athlete, in the mid 80s there, the sport was booming. It was really taking off, and I just always found a comfort in the sport of triathlon, whether it was for myself individually and and the feeling of going a place where I've never been before and trying to push myself to levels that I've never been before, or just the community of triathletes. And you'd understand that the people that you talk to in the community, and there's something very special about triathletes and everybody trying to optimize themselves and getting a little bit more out of life. And I always felt comfort there, and that's why my career being, basically from professional athlete from 18 to 44 was largely just, I enjoyed being around the people, and I enjoyed trying to see what I could do and get out of the sport. And I was incredibly blessed, and I'm very grateful for all the opportunities I had along the way. 18
to 44 years. I mean, that's remarkable. When you were coming through in those junior years, I heard you speaking with Chris McCormack, who you featured on the Greg Bennett show, and you were both dialoguing around. You got started at a local club, I think, doing biathlons back in the 90s. Biathlons, now aquathlons. That was much simpler back then. The biathlons were quite common, weren't they? You had them seemingly, most of the time. You had club races all the time, and there was no lack of ability to get yourself in a race, was there?
Well, what we were fortunate with, and I had Delly Carr on my show. I don't know if you've had Delly on yours, but Delly Carr, the world famous sports photographer in Australia, and Delly took my first ever photo in a race, and I think we decided it was 1988, Tari, one of those races, and we were talking about the fact that every local town up the East Coast had a race.
Yes.
And you would travel up the eastern seaboard and even go inland to Orange and Dubbo and some of these places. But we had races everywhere. And they weren't professionally run. They were often done by local, scout clubs or surf clubs or whatever. And they were putting it on to maybe make a few dollars for their club. But we had opportunity to race every weekend. And that was very special as a young guy coming up. And now that race was, it was either a triathlon or it was a aquathon, like you said, a biathlon. But we got to race and race often. When you look back at your career, what makes the difference? I think learning your craft and going and doing your craft often was what we had as Australians that allowed us to take on the world later on. We were coming out of Australia as 22, 23-year-olds, and I'd already raced 150 times, because it was sometimes twice on a weekend. We were racing. These days, I think it's harder for a lot of the younger guys. Trying to find a race it's become more difficult, and everything's become about training and training and training, whereas I think sometimes just throwing yourself in the deep end and racing. And not that we did everything right. Trust me, we were poor. We got injured. We were poor at training. We probably overdid it, but it was a treat to be able to, race often.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you share there, Greg, and what yourself and Delly were speaking about. I grew up in Grafton, New South Wales, and we had the annual Grafton Triathlon, and Matt Reed would come to town and towel everyone up, and we'd all be in awe as juniors. And there was Coffs Harbour Triathlon south of us and north of us. You pick it, Ballina Triathlon. You're right. There was a triathlon in every major regional hub and city. And what do you think? What do you think's changed? Is it just the professionalism of the sport and the fact that insurance, or what do you think's changed?
I think insurance was the big one. I remember it coming in. I remember being at Balmoral Triathlon Club in Mossman in Sydney there, and every Friday night we had it was a free biathlon. You just turn up and, you do a swim, run, swim, and then everyone would go off to the local pizza shop and hang out, right? It was that Friday night, 5 p.m. type thing. It was unbelievable. There'd be up to several hundred people, every Friday night. It was just fantastic. And then I remember it was the early 90s there, probably 93, 94. All of a sudden they said, we have to have insurance now. Mossman Council have said we must have insurance, and everybody must pay $3. And it doesn't sound like much, right? It was $3. And I was a university kid, where $3 actually was like, oh, geez. Okay. But it changed it. It changed all of a sudden there were a few less people, and because that $3 then went to $5 to $10, $15, $20 to do a local. Just a lot of these events stopped because now they became, you needed to get insurance. It became a bigger deal. Now you needed, part of the insurance was you now needed to have police there, or you need to have, and so these clubs, they didn't want to have to deal with any of it. So yeah, I think insurance killed a lot of that. I think it now made everything a lot more uptight and a lot more regimented. And so yeah, we lost everything, I think. And it became more professional because you had to have insurance and you had to have all the things set up. And so the races became a little bit more structured. But I think we lost a little bit of that flair.
Bit of that, this wildness about it. You used to rock up, pay your $10, fill in your paper form, put your bike on a tree or wherever you could find something, and away you'd go.
Yeah, I know. So look, I don't think it's all bad, but I think that was the transition that we went through. Yeah, gosh. And Greg, I'm fascinated to know, who was the first, two things with your early developmental years, who was the first triathlete that you admired? I remember the first triathlete that captured my attention was Brad Bevan off the front of the St. George Triathlon Series at Coffs Harbour and the bike bowl. I think Welshie was. I think you were in it. I think Welshie had his hands, his broken 2 wrists, and that was. What was the first moment for yourself, Greg? Like, who were you looking to as an up and coming junior triathlete? I was, being that I got in the sport through the mid '80s. I was captured by Hawaii Ironman and the Bud Light series that was going on in the US here in the late 80s. And Mark Allen was, for me, he was the one I was in awe of. I wanted to be like. Mark Allen was winning everything at the time in the late 80s there. And then he finally won, Hawaii Ironman in 89. I've become good friends with Mark and now Dave Scott as well, who's a neighbour just down the road. And these guys, for me, were the godfathers of the sport. They were the ones that established a sport that then took off. Then you have the Australians and, like you mentioned, Brad Bevan, Greg Welsh, these guys, Steve Foster, these guys, when they went 1, 2, 3 at the World Championships in Orlando, I remember going, wow, 3 Aussie guys have gone off and taken on the world and really done well. And then you even have, someone like a Miles Stewart who, was performing so well as a young kid. He was my age and he was, winning world championships on the Gold Coast. And I'm like, wow, as an 18-year-old. I mean, he was a freak. And so we were really blessed. What we had, if I think of, when I say we, I do think of, Chris McCormack, myself, Craig Alexander, Craig Walton, Chris Hill. We had these 3, 4 Australian guys that were taking on the world, coming home, and we got to race them every single weekend. So we had the world standard every weekend. I remember racing Miles Stewart just after he'd won the World Championships at Timbolgan on the East Coast in a local. I mean, most Australians wouldn't know where Timbolgan is. It's just near Grap. Where is it? There's on the coast there.
It's north of. It's just south of Tweed Heads, really. It's just over the border. Yeah.
But I mean, this is a tiny race. And here am I getting to race the world champion. It was like, and I got beaten, but I got second, and it was okay. But I got to know where the world level was, and. Like you, I know that far northeast coast there of New South Wales. I went to Lismore for university in 1990 and 91. So wow. I raced and I was part of Ballina Triathlon Club when it started, actually.
Oh, wow.
And that Ballina, Coffs Harbour, Grafton, I know very, very well. Byron Bay, all of that area. So when you mentioned that earlier in the show, it's like, oh yeah, I got fond memories of that and racing all those local races. Coffs Harbour was the big one. That was the big one that we all go to. But yeah, we had so many great athletes to aspire and look up to that it was a really special time. And then slowly I got to start racing them, being shoulder to shoulder with them. It took me many years to beat any of them, but it was nice to be able to have the opportunity.
And my recollection of watching your results over the years, Greg, is I describe it almost like a slow but consistent burn. Mm-hmm. You were always there, but then you were there, and then you were really there. And I remember, in my, late teens, leaving high school, going to university, still chasing triathlon at that stage myself. I remember you could not rule Greg Bennett out of any race. Your run leg just seemed to do this. I mean, that's my memories of your career. Is that fair, or you've experienced it differently?
No, I think you summed it up absolutely perfectly. I had some ability, but my main talent I had was absolute passion. I loved what I was doing, and whether you call that a talent or not, I don't know. But I think it's a major criteria for any successful person to have is absolute passion, and that passion is important because there's going to be downtimes when the flame is going to be flickering, and that passion is what keeps you alive during the injuries, during the mental and physical setbacks. And I had tremendous passion, and so with that, I was able to stay fairly consistent for a long period of time, and I learnt a lot during that time, and like you said, I think if I look at the first half of my career as this consistent athlete, which is a title that when you want to be the world's best is not that. I mean, if you're consistently winning, that's different, like a Javier Gomez or someone, that's different. But I was consistently there, right? I was a player and I was in the mix, but I was fourth at World Championships multiple times. I was fourth at the Olympics. I was that guy. I was that guy that made up the numbers, that could be in a breakaway but still wouldn't win. I'd be that guy that could be chasing behind but still wouldn't win. I'd had started to get numerous podiums, seconds and thirds. But when I broke down my career later on, the first half of my career was, I think I had a winning rate of about 7 or 8%, right? And so if I'd raced 200 times in my first part of my career, that's only 14 wins. And that includes, races that weren't big. I just wasn't winning. And I had a few World Cup wins, and I had just was that guy. But it really, if I looked at my second half of career, and it went to probably closer to 40 and 50% win rate, where I was having a 1 in 2 win at major competitions then, what races that mattered. For me, I can kind of look back and go, well, there's a number of things that changed, and we can either go into that now or later on in the show. But for me, that was in 2005, Laura and I, my wife, who was also a professional athlete, for those who don't know, and she raced for the US and at multiple Olympics and was really quite an outstanding athlete. But we decided to coach ourselves. Really started 2004, we transitioned before Athens Olympics. And when we decided to coach ourselves, we kind of said, at first it was like, yeah, let's coach ourselves. And then I had a moment, it was like, whoa, no, this is my career. This is my wife's career. Let's do it right. So I started studying. I started studying the greats, the great trainers, the great coaches of the 50s, 60s, 70s. I'd had good coaches myself, and I had a lot of experience by that stage. But I started reading about guys like Arthur Lydiard, Emil Zatopek. How did they train? What were they doing in the 50s and 60s and 70s? And we started structuring a physical training program that I believe was the best training program in the world. And that's the belief in my own training program had to be that, right? I mean, whether it was or wasn't, doesn't matter. But my belief was totally we were training better than anybody in the world. And we developed something that to this day, I think is still a tremendous amount of work, but it was very specific work. And we can go into that a bit later if you like. But on top of the physical, I started to realize mentally and emotionally, I wasn't in the right place to be a winner, my confidence was lacking. I believe that, I think Chris McCormack put it best, and I love this, he called it, I had imposter syndrome. I always felt like, should I even be here amongst these guys? There was something really missing. There was an ownership of believing I should be there. And so I really took control of that and said, right, well, what can we do about this attitude that I have, this mental anguish? And so I started really working hard at the visualizing and the self-talk and the affirmations and all of those things, and really worked at it. And I had two types of visualizing. One was kind of the physical, and one was lying on a massage table. But the physical would be I'd go out and I'd establish the players in my head. I'd establish the race that I was going to go do. And I'd have a workout, say it'd be like 10 by 3 minutes, efforts with 1 minute recovery or 90 seconds recovery. And say it's a race like Minneapolis, which at the time was, 200 grand wind, and it was, all the players were there. And so I'd know the course, I'd know the temperature, I'd understand the crowd, how big they were going to be, the announcers. And I'd be driving down to go do wherever I was going to do my run, but Cottonwood Trail here in Boulder was always a good place to do repeats like that. And I drive down and go, okay, who am I racing today? All right, Peter Robinson, Simon Lessing, Simon Whitfield, Hamish Carter, Bevan Doherty. Okay, name 5 or 6 guys. Now, how's the race going to play out? All right, well, I'm going to have a strong swim. I'm going to be, mid to tail end of that lead group. Andy Potts is going to be leading. It's going to be really fast. I'm going to be exhausted coming out of the water. I'm going to hop on the bike and I'm going to lay down the first, 10 kilometers, 400 watts, whatever it is, 5.5 my body weight for the first 10 kilometers, 5 times my body weight for the rest of the bike, blah, blah, blah. But it's going to be staggered rules, so you got to understand. But when are you going to go, break it down? Then off the bike, who's going to be where? Who are they? Peter Robinson, for people who don't know, 3-time Australian world champion, phenomenal guy to visualize because he would attack 3 massive surges. He had 3 massive surges that were insane. You'd be running just over 3-minute K pace and he'd drop down to a 240 K pace, sprinting, absolutely sprinting. You'd be like, what the hell? But that's how he won races. And so I enjoyed having him as someone that I'd visualize. Simon Lessing was a stayer. Simon Whitfield was a sprinter. You had to get rid of him by 3-4K, otherwise he'd have a sniff that he could hang there. So I'd have all these players, right? And so when I go down and visualize, I'd have a commentator in my head, usually Phil Liggett or somebody that I loved. And I have the helicopter going above. And I just create that scenery. And I would repeat these races over and over and over and over again. And the physical visualizing would change throughout the workout. And there's some days you turn up and you're tired, right? So then I just changed the visual to go, that's been the most brutal bike ever, and everybody's now having to, it's a slower run than expected, but, so you always change it to the positive. And I always had myself winning, obviously.
Of course.
And then I had the static visualizing where I'd lie on a massage table, and that would be, less heightened, but more going through a whole race, my warm-up, where am I going to do my warm-ups? And that was just to lie there and visualize. And I had a doctor on my show by the name of Dr. Tommy Wood, worth having on your show, a really great guy. And I was talking about this. I said, at what point can visualizing affect you? And he said, well, what you think has a direct impact on you physically. It really does. And the science coming out on what we actually think and the hormones that we can create has a direct impact on our physiology. It's absolutely incredible, the science coming out. And so that's where I know that now. At the time, I just thought it helped just to see what was going to happen. But I was actually affecting myself physically every time I visualized. And that's what a bonus, right? I mean, it doesn't hurt to visualize. You just think about it.
It's not costing you anything.
No, but it's so powerful. And now I use it for whatever I want to do. You can use visualizing to be a great dad. You can use it to be, It takes work and it takes structure like anything, but you can actually affect yourself by just thinking about things often, consistently, like we do with our physical training. But the emotional side of it, I think, was when I look back in my career, and like I said earlier, going from that sort of 7 to 8% win rate to a 50%, 40%, let's call it 40%. The biggest impact was the fact that I started growing that self-belief and that confidence that came with it, that I would get to a race and believe I was going to win. I knew I had the tools, don't get me wrong, I had the physical training, the tools in my tool belt, but I knew how to extract those tools and make sure a win happened. And that was really empowering. But it took me a long time to learn it. I was not a fast learner. I was, I think, I was probably 33, 34 when I really felt like my career took off. I really think that first 14, 15 years, I was getting results. I was a professional athlete. I was loving what I was doing, but I wasn't that guy that owned the winning circle.
Gosh, I mean, that's regardless of results, and it's nice that resulted in a 40 to 50% win ratio. So there was actual tangible change. But irrespective, it's a great example of sticking with your craft long enough through enough adversity. And you use the two words there, mental anguish. That doesn't sound very pleasant. to learn the mistakes, overcome the mistakes, and find success. I mean, and it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in an Olympic cycle either. You were 33, 34 at that point.
Yeah. Look, for me, I had a very blessed career. Have you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers?
Yes.
Yeah. So he we always talk about hard work and talent. And then he drops in, well, actually, there's opportunity. It has to be the third criteria. And my wife, Laura, always says, my career was full of opportunity. And it'd be wrong of me to say, it was just because of my hard work and talent that I got to have so many tremendous gifts. No, I had tremendous opportunity. When I was 22, just coming onto the scene, coming out of university, full-time study, and Australia suddenly had this thing called the Grand Prix Triathlon Series. I'm 22. It's short super sprint style racing, which now Chris McCormack has in the Super League Triathlon. But I was ripe for the taking. It was the perfect age for me to suddenly jump into this Grand Prix, live television, super sprint style racing, 5 to 7 events in an Australian summer where we'd race 3 to 4 times on a weekend. Well, usually, actually not 4 times, 3 times on a weekend. And so I'd come out of that racing, onto the World Cup and the World Championships. And then the Olympics was announced. And suddenly we had the Grand Prix and the Olympics. And the Olympics were going to be at home in Sydney, 2 miles from where I grew up. And I was like, wow, okay. Long story short, didn't make the 2000 Olympics, but it heightened the sport. It was suddenly the media loved us, the sponsors started coming on board. All of that started happening. I go to finally I make the 2004 Olympics, blah, blah, blah. Then what am I going to do? Okay, I've done the Olympics, tick the box, that was great. I got 4th. I would have loved a medal, but whatever. And the racing in the US started to become more professional, prize money, and it became non-drafting, which was really my talent. To be able to have a time trial bike was a real gift for me. That was where my true talent probably lay. So then this non-drafting series, the Lifetime Fitness Triathlon Series, which had been a one-day event with Minneapolis for a couple of years before, but now they turned it into a series in 2006. And this series was big money. In 2007, they said, if you win all 5, we'll put up even bigger money. And so for me, it was, now I'm 34, 35. I've had my Grand Prix and Australian type racing. I've had my ITU World Cup series and the Olympics. And now I've got this non-drafting Olympic distance style of racing. And then even in that, the Lifetime Series went for a number of years, but that started to die off. And the High V Triathlon, a one-off race in Des Moines, Iowa, here in the US, had been a draft legal race. I'd had a few thirds in that, but never won it. And then they could go, in 2011, they said, we're going to make it a non-drafting. Now I'm 39, but I'm the guy that's got all the experience of doing the non-drafting series, taking on all the guys coming from the Olympics. And so I win that in 2011. My point with all of that is every time I got a little bit tired of one direction, whether that be mental or physical, a new opportunity came up where I could adapt, if you like, transition over to another style of racing. And it gave me this new edge to keep going. And it was really, once all the non-drafting Olympic distance style racing concluded in the US for me, like the High V race started to lose its money kind of around that 2013, 14. And I started doing more of the 70.3 Ironmans. And I was doing those, and I think I won 8 out of 15. But even the 8 that I won, I kind of crossed the line each time going, didn't really enjoy it. And that's when I knew, okay, it was time, and I retired in 2016. And I did a couple of Ironmans, and that wasn't my thing either. But for me, I have tremendous gratitude for all the opportunity that came my way. And it'd be wrong to say it was just the way that I suddenly changed my training and changed my mental and emotional approach. It was like, no, well, actually, I got to have these incredible events by these amazing people that put on this opportunity to allow us to make a great income and have a great career. So that's kind of my career in short. And Laura always shakes her head and goes, yeah, every time you kind of got tired of one thing, another thing popped up for you. And so I was,
It makes me think, though, Greg, of we've already referenced Australian colleague there, Chris McCormack, who does say chase opportunities, not dreams.
Absolutely.
Chase opportunities, and it seems like a play on words, but it's quite different in its principle.
I would say, rather than chase, I'd say be aware. Allow yourself to be aware. Like we all get tunnel vision where we're doing one thing and we might be doing it very, very well, but be aware of it. I remember a couple of athletes saying after I won the 5 from 5 in 2007 and it was a decent payday, and it was a very hard thing to do, and it's probably if I look at my career, the thing I'm most proud of. But a number of athletes came up to me and said, I should have done that. I should have done that series. And I'm like, well, it was open to anybody that was a professional athlete, right? But you chose to focus entirely on the Olympic Games and the ITU movement, and that's fine. But you weren't aware of you should have been more aware of it, because as a professional athlete, you got to be looking around. How can I make a career here, right? It's a business. It's how do I pay the bills? If I want to do this, how do I make it happen? And it's not all about the money. I'm not saying that by any means. It's obviously it's about bettering yourself and seeing what you can do, but you can't do that unless you're making money. So they have to work hand in hand. So being aware and then chasing, I would say, the opportunity, Be
aware and then chase. And Greg, you just touched on perhaps your crowning achievement from your career being the 5 slam there, Minneapolis, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dallas. You said it was a good payday. What was the overall payday? I mean, it's in the public domain.
Well, firstly on that, what I'm most proud of is not the payday.
Yeah, of course.
And I will tell you the payday. I'm not being a political. I'm just saying, Laura and I, when we decided to coach ourselves in that 04-05 period, really decided to take it on. And the great thing about 07 was, well, it was even 06, because 06 I won each race. But in 07, when they came out and said, look, if anybody can win all 5, we'll pay this bonus. And we all sat back and said, well, Emma Snowsill will do it. She's the best in the world. She's undefeated. But no guy will do it. Because at the time, I wasn't a Javier Gomez. I wasn't an Alistair Brownlee. We all shared the wins. It was Hamish Carter, Bevan Doherty, Simon Whitfield, Simon Lessing. There was a group. There was 10 guys that could win a race, and we all basically took turns. No guy was going to win 5 from 5, especially as all the courses were very different. But for me to have a career, to have a year where everything you set out to do happened, it's very rare, right? You'll set these goals and these ambitions, and we put them up there, and they're lofty, and they're, it's that expression of you shoot for the stars and you land on the moon. Well, I shot for the stars and I hit the stars. I mean, that doesn't happen. And on top of that, Laura she won the High V World Cup, which was also a $200,000 payday and a Hummer car, and it was a big deal. And so we had this year where we both won everything we set out to do, and her goal was also to make the Beijing Olympics, and she qualified doing that. And so for me, it was very special. But what started it was I wasn't even really particularly looking at the 5 from 5. Yep. What people don't know is that in 2006, the 2006 series was New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and ended with Minneapolis in 07. And if you won that series, it was a $60,000 payday. So I'd won New York, Craig Alexander, Crowe won Chicago, and then I won LA. And so now we went to Minneapolis, Crowe and I, and whoever won Minneapolis or beat each other basically was going to win the 2006 series. In fact, I think he had to beat me by 2 or 3 spots, but basically if he did that, he could win the series. So I went there going, okay, I've got to beat Crowe. But the win for Minneapolis itself was $60,000, and the win for that 06 was $60,000. So that was going to be a $120,000 payday. So my whole focus for 10 months leading into Minneapolis, because from Los Angeles in September to Minneapolis in July was a long period. My whole focus was win Minneapolis, win it. And I turned up in great shape and ended up winning the race, and I think Crowe was third in the end and had a very strong race. And he was already sort of transitioning over to the Ironman world, so he did very well. But then New York was the next weekend, and I'd won New York the year before, so I'd won Minneapolis, and I was go win New York. New York, out of all the races in the world, suited me more than anything. Down current swim, come out of the water 10 to 15 seconds behind Craig Walton, who is just probably the greatest swimmer open water swimmer I've ever swum against. Craig Walton from Australia, just brilliant. And probably the greatest power biker that I've ever raced against, just absolute raw power. And so for me, he was always like, how am I going to beat this guy, right? I have to keep him within, usually it was like 2.5 minutes off the bike, and maybe I'd have a chance. But New York, it was down current swim. I could beat Waldo to the bike because it was an 800-meter run off out of the swim and jump on the bike in front of him, and now he had to ride away from me. But the bike was hills on the Henry Hudson Highway in New York City. It was actually really quite hilly. For me, with my power to weight, I could match Waldo and even beat him on the bike in New York. And then the run through Central Park also suited me. So, boom, win the second one in New York, really special. So then the next race, least favourite race for me, Chicago. Second there many times, never won it, dead flat. I was like, how am I going to beat Craig Walton here? He's won it twice or 3 times. And I thought, you know what, if I can keep him within 2.5 minutes, maybe I could outrun him. But it's going to take a sub 30-minute type run off the bike. Get off the bike and I hear 2 minutes 40. I'm like, damn it. I just said, well, sprint. Just sprint. It wasn't run 10K. It was sprint as hard as you can and see what happens, right? And I remember, I still think it's probably my greatest 5K effort in my entire life.
Wow.
And I mentioned 5K because the next 5K was hell. So I caught Craig Walton at about 6-7K. And I don't know what I ran, but it was fast. But then when I caught him, and I had to surge past, the typical create the gap. I got the gap, but then the final 2 kilometers, I was smashed. I was done. I've never crawled home from it in a run, and I managed to hold him off, but I really blew myself to pieces. It was, in terms of pacing, it was the worst pacing you could ever want. But I did. I actually won Chicago, and so now the media and everybody starts to get excited about it, and now the pressure started to sort of mount. My own personal pressure, but also the extrinsic pressure of the media, and it was Los Angeles. It was the 4th event, and. But LA, I'd also won a couple of times, and it was sort of a race that did probably suit me a little bit more. And but when I got off the bike, Craig Walton I remember running our transition, had no idea where he was. I thought I'd ridden okay, but the legs had felt a bit flat. And I'd ridden with Simon Lessing and Steve Hackett, Nicole Hackett's brother, and Steve was really an up-and-coming young Australian professional triathlete who was training with Craig Walton, very good swim biker. Yep. And got off the bike and I thought, well, where am I? And one of my sponsors yelled out from the side of the road just as I ran our transition, 3 minutes. And my initial reaction was, because the pressure had been really, really big, it was like, oh, great, it's over. I've won the series. Don't worry about the 5 from 5, Yeah. And then fortunately I had a split second, was like, Greg, are you crazy? This is an opportunity. You go. And again, it was that kind of just sprint and see what happens. So I just started sprinting. And LA is a brutal run course. It's basically you run from the Staples Center straight up, I think it's called Olympic Boulevard, straight up to the Disney Center. And I don't know what the gradient is, but if I said 15%, like it's that steep running. That running where you're bent over, kind of running up the hill. And it's 2 laps out and back. And I get to the top, and Waldo he's miles in front. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I get to the downhill, and one gift I really had was my downhill ability. And I think it's because I had very high cadence, generally a fairly short stride, but downhill would allow me to get that real length of stride plus cadence. So I could run downhill quicker than anybody that I was up against at the time. And so I just let it go. And I remember my arms, when you're running, you're just free falling. I think I look like a cartoon character, just free falling down this hill. And And so that first lap, I took a decent chunk out of Craig, and long story short, sprinted down the hill again the second time, caught Waldo with about 600 meters to go. And then I thought, great, I got him. And then he sprinted past me. And I'm like, I remember Waldo has a sprint, he has a decent kick. And he came back at me. I'm like, what? I just took 3 minutes out of you. And anyway, I did end up winning by about 5 seconds. And then everybody's like, because everybody knew we were mates too. So like, did Waldo give it to Greg? Did he? No, he did not give it to me. And anybody that knows Waldo knows that he's a man of character, and there's no way he's going to give an inch.
No, totally.
But then now I have one more race to go to win this big bonus and win the series. So the series was going to be a 60 grand bonus, plus the races had 60 grand wins, some of them. So they were decent paychecks, these events. But then Laura had to go to Beijing to qualify for her Olympic team. And I wanted to be there with her in Beijing. So I then flew out that night from LA and went to Beijing to support Laura in her quest for, making the Olympics for the US, for Beijing. And so I went over to Beijing. Laura had a great race. Ended up having a really big party over there. You wouldn't think that would be a smart thing to do with 4 weeks until sort of this big race. But anyway, came back. And I was injured. My Achilles flared up, and I had that a few times throughout my career, and I learned to manage it usually through just some psoas stretching and everything else, which we can talk about injuries later. But so I didn't tell anybody I was injured, and I had my chiropractor in Florida, Dr. Alex Keith, who was just my go-to in terms of my team. He was my number one guy. And I ended up flying down to Florida. He worked on me a bit. I was mentally and emotionally in a bit of a tough place because it was this pressure had mounted. I had to perform. It wasn't a choice of be nice to get a good race. No, I had to win. I had to win in Dallas. It wasn't a choice. And that was a lot of pressure. It really started to mount. And I think that was almost, there was an emotional component to my injury that was going on as well. I don't know if you talk about that much, but the emotional energy and what we talk about with what you think directly impacts your physiology. I think there was that stress component. And but he took me to a shooting range. I've never shot a gun in my life, and I'm petrified of guns. I don't particularly like guns. Sorry to gun lovers out there, but I'm just not a huge fan. But he took me to a shooting range, and here am I holding these things in my hand, these huge heavy objects, and it was almost like this emotional release of firing this gun. Scared the crap out of me. I was sweating, could hardly hold on to the thing. I thought I was going to drop it and shoot someone. But it was in this range, bang, 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 bang. And it was almost the greatest release. And I let go. I fully let go. And it's the strangest thing, right? I'm not saying go to gun range. I'm not by any means. But it was, for me at that time, is what I needed. And I came back. Went to Dallas, flew Dr. Alex Keith out, and then Dr. Camille Abergain, a friend of hers, also. They came to the hotel room at 2 a.m., worked on my body, early morning start races over here, 6 a.m. or whatever start. They worked on my body for 2 to 3 hours. I went down to the race, and let's just cut this story short. But basically, went and performed at the race, got off the bike, decided to fake the run. I knew Bevan Doherty, Philip Osplay from Czech Republic. These guys were, I think, number two or three in the world at the time. They'd brought Benjamin Sanson over to swim with Craig Walton. The race organisers really didn't want to be paying this out first time. And so I was up against it. But then, I just remember running through that 5K, just sprint and see if you can open a gap. And I did a bit again. A bit of the Chicago type mindset, sprint and see what happens. And that final 5K was brutal, but I held off, Bevan and Philip for, by about 30 seconds and won the race. And for that day, it was a 300 grand bonus for winning the 5. Oh. It was a 60 grand for winning Dallas, and it was a 60 grand for winning the series, plus the series events throughout that. So it was a good payday for the year. It was just over $500,000. And for triathlon at the time, that was... Well, at any time. I mean,
even now.
And look, I didn't do anything that special with it. We put on a few parties for friends and that kind of thing. Otherwise, it went into the house. But like I said before, that whole ramble, it was really about having a year where the body turned up for the most part, and I was able to deliver performances. And I wasn't that athlete before that era that could do that. I wasn't the guy I wasn't the Brad Bevan in the Grand Prix in the 90s that was winning. I wasn't that guy. But that was the first time in my career, and now I'm 35, where suddenly I got to show up and have consistent winning, great performances. And so, yeah, it was a good time.
I mean, that's outstanding, Greg. I mean, just as you say, it's a huge day, huge achievement, dealing with the pressure that just grows and grows and grows. And then you happen to come down with an Achilles issue going into the last race, which anyone that's ever dealt with an Achilles issue knows, it creates some limitations, particularly with your speed work and your recovery. And it's interesting, you said, is there a component of the psychological stress, et cetera, that you're under? And, modern pain science, Greg, absolutely points to this biopsychosocial model of pain. And that is, if there's stressors in your life, which can be many and varied, that can absolutely be an amplification on any physical pain that you're experiencing. So you had a lot going on, but as you say, you showed up, you overcame, you're consistent, and as you say, it wasn't about the payday, but what a great memory and even better story.
Yeah. Well, it probably gets better and better the older I get too. But it was a special time.
But I mean, $500,000 paydays in whatever it was total in triathlon do not happen very often, if at all.
No.
So that's outstanding. And Greg, has there been a darkest day in your career? If so, what?
Look, I am one of those people that kind of go, even on your darkest day, there's a lesson to be learned, right? And it's hard to see it at that time. So now through hindsight, I can go, they were great lessons. But at the time, the 2000 Olympics for me was, that was a dark day. It was, I was ranked number 2 in the world. I'd won the Sydney World Cup the year before. I'd been third the 3 years before that. I'd been very consistent. It was a course that really suited me, the Sydney Olympics, with the Macquarie Street finish downhill, with the bike being undulating and a little bit technical, with a rough water swim, because actually when you're in next to the Opera House there, it's quite rough, the choppy swim. And it was 2 miles from my house. I felt very, very comfortable there in Sydney. And look, like I said, I learnt a lot. I didn't perform to the level I should have to make it easy for the selectors. In hindsight, I can see that there's a lot more I could have done and been better prepared. But I turned up. The 2 qualifying races were 2 weeks apart. One was Sydney World Cup and one was Perth World Championships in May of 2000. And we all turned up to Sydney. All the Australians, we had 7 or something of us ranked in the top 25 in the world at the time. We were the powerhouse. It was, Chris McCormack was number 1 in the world at the time. And we all turned up to Sydney and just went diabolical. It was the only guy that performed well was a guy who just made it onto the shadow team, which means you could qualify for the Olympics, and he just scraped on. And he did it in a race in New Zealand, and he scraped on. And then he came in and won the Sydney World Cup, and that was Peter Robinson. And all of us are like, who's this kid? What's going on? He wasn't meant to be one of the guys. What? So one spot's gone to this kid that we'd never heard of before. And don't get me wrong, Robbo went on to do incredible things, but this was his first time. Then we all went to Perth, and I was like, okay, there's 2 spots left, because everybody went so rubbish at Sydney. I think Courtney Atkinson is another young kid who was the next best Australian in Sydney in the 20s, I think. I'd have to look it up, but... So we went to Perth and go, right, 2 more spots. And then Perth, a breakaway happened with Craig Walton and a couple of others. And Waldo ended up having the race of his life. Tremendous race. And great to see him make the Olympics. You know what I mean? It was one of those outstanding races, and he made it happen. I think he ended up finishing 3rd at those world champs. Boom, he's on the team. Robbo got off the pack with me and Chris McCormack, who had just been annihilating that second bike group, trying to chase Robbo. We towed around 30 guys that wouldn't swap turns with. They knew that Macca and I had to race each other to make the Olympic spot. And they knew we were going to do the work. So everyone sat behind us, including Robbo. He sat on our wheel, and then he had an outstanding run and ran all the way up and won the race. Macca and I get off the bike, and Well, now Robbo's gone, Waldo's gone, one spot left, right? So having a running race with Macca, who, is a very, very good runner, and I run up to, what did I finish there? It was either 8th or 10th again. Can't remember. Beat Macca. Okay, going to the Olympics, right? Great result. 2nd in the world, 8th of the world champs, 3rd Australian or 10th. I could be wrong. Somebody's going to put me out here. Anyway, I call Mum and Dad. They weren't there, but I call them and say, look, I think I've got my ticket. Off we go. And then this series called the Fuji Xerox series started on the Wednesday after that Sunday race in Perth. And this Fuji Xerox series, you all raced in teams, Australia Gold, Australia Green. There was Team Europe, Team USA, and I think, or Team North America, and then Team New Zealand. And we go off and we do this series. And I'd done the series the year before, and you go all around Australia and you race every single day. On the bus trips, suddenly we start hearing this rumour that, Miles Stewart has filed a disadvantage clause. But I hadn't even read the contract. I signed the contract. Okay, I'll just go race and they'll pick the best performers. But long story short, the disadvantage clause was written in legal terms that it'll look at an athlete's history if they can't race the 2 selection races because of sickness or injury, and they have doctor's notes to support it. Because it was written like that, they would look at Miles Stewart's World Championship victory in 91, so the 9 years previous, and compare that to anything that the other athletes had done at the selection races. So in the end, the selectors legally had no other choice but to put Miles onto the team. And it caught me off guard. I didn't even see that coming. Miles hadn't done the trials and everything else. Nothing against Miles. He we're friends, and I think he's done he's a phenomenal athlete. And if I had to pick the best triathlon team for Australia on that day, I think the best team would have had Miles on it. So, and he did end up getting 6th, I think, at Sydney Olympics. But for me, it was just a little bit like the blanket was torn from under my feet. I just didn't see it coming. And so I did sort of fight it legally for a moment. I didn't spend much money on it. But the way the contract was written, I didn't have a foot to stand on. And so I was tempted to retire. That was it was only from a note from Simon Whitfield, who I'd been mates with I think we met in 91 at a Port Macquarie triathlon, and a young Canadian kid. Well, he's dual citizen. He was Australian and Canadian, and he was doing high school in Canada, and we became good mates and training buddies all through the 90s there. And then in 2000, he'd made the Canadian Olympic triathlon team. He left Australia, went back to race for Canada. And he said, Greg, well, why don't you come over to Victoria, Canada, and help me get ready for the Games? And I said, yeah, I need a change. I've been with my coach, Brett Sutton, for 4 years. I was a bit disappointed. My passion for the sport was wavering, And I said, yeah. So for me, I went over, started training with Simon. One day, this girl pops up at the pool. I'm like, who's that? And it happened to be now my wife of, we've all been together 21 years, Laura Bennett, Laura Reback at the time. And so I look back at that Olympics and go, I didn't get the Olympics, but I got the girl. And so it's one of these things, you come out going, life, good luck, bad luck, who knows, right? And for me, I couldn't have asked for a better career in terms of the opportunities I've had and the things that have come my way. I kind of missed that Sydney Olympics. I would have loved to have been a part of that. Did I deserve it? I don't think so, because I think I should have performed better. I wasn't ready. I think I should have made it easy for the selectors like Craig Walton and Peter Robinson did. I think just at the time it hurt a little bit. But I found my footing, and in the end, Simon Whitfield, he went and won the Olympic gold. I was standing there in the stadium because I was the first reserve for the Australian team. But I'm not going to lie, I had a tiny Canadian flag, and it wasn't so much about Canadians. It was about mateship first.
Yeah.
He was my mate, and he was a dual citizen. So, and when he jumped off the podium the dais at the Olympics, and they were walking past, and he ran past and ran up to the stadium where I was and put the medal around my neck and said, "Greg, this is yours." So there was a really special moment that I'll remember as somewhat of a career highlight. It wasn't my result, but it was definitely a part where, you know, I can almost bring myself to tears, of emotional tears, where a mate sort of did that. That it was we did it together, so that got my career going again after that, you know, and then I went on, 2002 and 2003, won the World Series back to back, and was ranked number one in the world for 3 years, and that was the trajectory I needed. So it's a slap in the face. Sometimes we need those to go, hey, it's not ideal, but there's a reason, and it was good.
That's an incredible story. I've never heard that, and I actually wasn't aware that you were training with Simon in the lead up to which was the first triathlon Olympic gold. It was
opening day with the women's, and the men's was the second day, and
all eyes were on it.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It was huge. It was, the Sydney Olympics, man, Australia's awesome. You know, Australians are awesome. It's this energy around sport, and I really feel like Australia delivered so well on that day. Those 2 weeks, I think. When we want to be proud Australians, that time it was Australians stepped up. They delivered not only a professionally run series, but every Australian was behind it. They were putting up teams in their homes. It was this energy that I think Australians can be so proud of during that time. And I think that's why sometimes I look back and it would have been nice to have been in the race, but I was still there and a part of it. And, I think the British did well with London Olympics, had that same kind of energy. But Sydney, man, we did well. Australians, we did well.
and Greg, you ended up with a gold medal around your neck. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah, for a moment.
You're listening to Greg Bennett, dual ITU World Series champion and Australian Olympic triathlete, on this Featured Performer episode. Support for today's show comes from Earshot's Bluetooth headphones. If you are a runner or cyclist who charges, then you must get Earshot's headphones into your earbuds. Earshot's Bluetooth headphones were forged in the rugged New Zealand National Park landscape by CEO and co-founder James Bell Booth. And I caught up with James recently, and I asked James around their proprietary magnetic clip, which ensures that the headphones do not dislodge. Here's what James had to say.
We think it's pretty game-changing, not from what we've just been able to do with the current version, but our ideas for the future as well, and what using that technology will enable us to do in future versions of the product. It was definitely a lot harder to develop than what I thought it was, but the fundamentals of it, I think, will lead us to, being the best headphone for any type of physical endeavour. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Now, the team at Earshot's Bluetooth headphones have generously offered up 10% off the recommended retail of $167.95 simply by using the coupon code TPPS at checkout. And you can join a number of Physical Performance Show's listeners who have been enjoying and reporting the great benefits of Earshot's Bluetooth headphones. 20 hours of charge, who doesn't want that for those long training sessions? Now, we are thrilled to be hosting our upcoming live stream event with UK-based sports dietitian and author Rinny McGregor, Fueling the Endurance Athlete. During the 3-hour live stream event scheduled for the 4th of September, 3 to 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, Rinny will cover off on 4 key modules: defining what it is that constitutes an endurance athlete, debunking common myths around fueling, such as lighter makes you faster, why it is that we need to treat male and female athletes differently, and Rinny will share around avoiding the common pitfalls of relative energy deficiency in sport. Of course, there'll be time for live Q&A with Rinny. Now, if you cannot attend the live stream event, the good news is a post-event recording and full copies of the presentation via PDF will be made available to all registrants. Tickets are $49, available over at pogophysio.com.au/Rinny McGregor live stream, or jump over to the bio for the Physical Performance Show's Instagram handle, and there you can get your tickets. Now, for our patrons of the show, that's our monthly supporters who support the show from just $5 per month, we'll be granting you complimentary access to Rinny's upcoming live stream, so wait for your access codes. And if you would like to become a patron of the Physical Performance Show, we'll grant you access to all future live stream events complimentary, and of course our back catalogue of live stream events, including Dr. Stephen Seiler on all things polarised training and Dr. Shona Halson on all things optimising recovery. And finally, today's show is also brought to you by Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations. If you're an endurance athlete struggling with bone, tendon or joint-related concerns, then rest assured our online 45-minute telehealth consultations are an ideal platform to help get you back to your physical best. Here's a success story from Tasmanian-based recreational triathlete Sarah, who overcame a persistent foot bone stress injury to get back to her triathlon best.
Hey, I'm Sarah. I'm a competitive age group triathlete from Australia, and telehealth 100% works. I did telehealth with Brad for chronic sesamoiditis, and I didn't need any hands-on treatment. I had exercise prescription and load management with my training, and this, along with Brad's expertise and genuine care, got me across my pogo finish line.
Thanks, Sarah. So if you'd like to get back to your best physically, jump over to pogophysio.com.au/telehealth. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, none other than triathlon legend, Australian Olympian, 23 times ITU World Series podium place getter, Greg Bennett.
Greg, let's shift gears into a physical a performance round, which is some rapid fire questions. Are you ready to roll this?
Let's do it, yeah.
All right. Greg Bennett, favourite training session?
Favourite training session, 20 by 1 minute with 1 minute recovery, running, where you basically keep your recovery as high as you can, but you're 1 minute on, you're 1 minute off. Your 1 minute on is as hard as you can go. Fast, and it's all fartlek. So it's undulating hills, it's on the country, it's cross country. It's great for visualizing, great for overall endurance, and great for that developing that VO2, that engine. But there's a sustainable component to it as well. Really favourite workout by far. Love it.
Wow. 21 minutes, 1 minute on, 1 minute off, fartlek.
Yeah.
Training session.
No, not 21, just 20.
20. Sorry, 21.
20 by 1 minute. Yeah.
20 by 1, exactly. Yeah. Greg, I think I might have a sniff at the answer on this one already. Training session most disliked. Is there such a thing for Greg Bennett?
Oh, yeah. I anything in the pool, but no, not anything. I love sprint work in the pool, but things like 8 by 400s or 10 by 400s in the pool, not a fan. I liked anything sort of 50 meter type work, 100 meter type work even, but the legs just got heavier through the 400 meter type work. I was, in the pool, not my favorite thing.
Favorite pre-race meal, Greg?
You know, I got probably to the point where I'd do a chicken breast with some pastoral rice and some broccoli just soaked in olive oil. That was pretty much it the night before races, if I could get that, yeah.
Is that what you used to fuel you to the 5-pack there, Minneapolis, Chicago?
And it is. Right? And you know, it's an easy one to get at most places. Just get me chicken, pasta and rice, or pasta or rice and some broccoli or green on the side. It was simple and it was easy, right?
Keep it simple, scientists. Who is the athlete that Greg Bennett most admires and why?
The athlete that I most admire. You know what? I'm going to have to say I can't pick one because I think I've taken so much from so many. Obviously, my wife, Laura, I just think is one of the greatest in the sense that her emotional management, and what I mean by that is she could find, and she helped me big time. I was quite a passionate up and down roller coaster emotions, and she helped me get to that even keel that she had innately. She's like my pocket psychologist, if you like. She's always there just helping maintain that steady, don't go too high, but it also, don't go too low. And I think that helped me the most. So I'll point out her for the emotional side. But gee, there's just so many of my peers that I just admire, that I've just enjoyed so much either training with or getting beaten by in races or trying to beat. And I really can't pick one because over 30 years, there's just so many guys that have come in and out. And then even on my podcast, just getting to chat with even the athletes that are there today, the past icons, there's just too many. I can't pick you one. Sorry, mate.
No, that's a fair answer. And then it may be the same for the next question, Greg, which is the toughest competitor you ever raced.
I mentioned Craig Walton mainly because he was in that era where I had to win, and he really laid it down every single time I raced. Then there's guys like Alistair Brownlee and Javier Gomez that I just couldn't figure out how to beat them, and I've said that to both of them, where until that point in my career, where that was very, very tail end of my career, but still, I always felt like every athlete was somewhat beatable. Whether it was Brad Bevan, Greg Welsh, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I felt like there was a way to beat them. I could get my head around it when I was visualizing. I could see it. Chris McCormack, any of these, I could see it. They were peers, and for the most part, they beat me more than I beat them. But when it came to Javier Gomez and Alistair Brownlee, and even Johnny Brownlee to a less extent, I didn't race Johnny much, so I don't really know, but I couldn't figure out how to beat them. And that hurt. That hurt because it was the first time I was like, wow, I don't think I can. And that was a moment in my life where I'm like, God, I don't think I can beat these guys. How frustrating. I almost beat Javier. Well, I did beat Javier a couple of times. And I think even Alistair, I think we're even. But I'm taking shots at Alistair when he was 17, 18, you know what I mean? Like, that's not fair. But when Alistair really came on board, I could beat him. And Javier, even in the non-drafting, when he come over here, it was like, damn it, he's still getting me. So I guess those two took me out of my career to some degree.
Well, I mean, two of the all-time greats, right, Greg? So I think I've heard you say they retired you, and it's decent company to be retired by. Greg, across the years, was there a consistent mantra? I mean, you broke your career down into two halves there, pre-belief and, post-belief in yourself. But was there a mantra that you used consistently in the back half of your career, or was it just changing depending on the situation?
I think it did change. I think there was lots of affirmations or mantras that I used throughout my career. I think the second half of the career did. I don't know if it's a mantra, but you hear my quote where on the show I use it all the time, where success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. And what I mean by that is this: turn up consistency every single day, do the hard work, do the right work is probably better than hard work, because you never know what's just around the corner. And even my father-in-law, who's 80-year-old, still passionately about a triathlete, just loves it. And he once said to us, something is better than nothing. And it's a very simple little phrase, but it's that just do something little, even if it's get some body work done or do your own body, but do something. And I used to use that on days where you were tired or whatever, and do a little bit or go out the door and start. But it's amazing how even if you just do a 10-minute jog, a 10-minute run walk, how that it can affect you mentally and emotionally, how that can dial your physiology. It can help your heart rate variability, if we want to talk some of that, your blood glucose levels. It can help. Just something is better than nothing. So those two kind of things stick out to me when I think of things that have kept me going.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, as you say, something that you say on your show, the Greg Bennett show, success comes to those who endure for just a moment, or moment more, which is so powerful. But something is better than nothing. Wow, that's so powerful, so practical. Greg Bennett, your best recovery tip?
Best recovery tip. I actually think it's probably to do a recovery day rather than a recovery nothing. And that recovery day, if you've had a lot of work on the legs, it might be just go for a stroll. A stroll with a light jog if you feel it, or a very light spin on the bike. And when I say spin, I don't mean high spinning, because that's too much pressure on your calves. Just move the blood. I think movement is better than non-movement. Every now and then, if you're absolutely spent, of course, just hop into some compression boots, the Normatec compression boots we used to do. And, but, we got to the point where it was Epsom salt baths, it was, light body work, but getting blood flow, getting the fascial release type work, critical. I mean, there's so many things. I guess that's not one thing, is it? I just listed off a million, but I think blood flow, fascial movement is key, so you don't seize up.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Brown, who I think we've both hosted as guests, he's got that great adage, just don't stop. I can't, as he's going into his 50 years, 50th year on the planet, still a competitive Ironman force, and he's like, I just can't stop. Otherwise I can't get going again.
It's true.
Greg, one word to describe your racing style.
I don't think it's aggressive. I think it's squeeze.
Squeeze.
Yeah, the reason is a word like squeeze. Well, it's this. Not for a moment do I want the pace to slow down, and it's this squeezing everything out of myself at every moment and making sure anybody I'm up against is absolutely getting squeezed themselves. That. I don't know where that word it just popped in. I don't know. It's just that kind of like the race should never be easy, and it's. And squeezing is just kind of squeezing every ounce of energy out of yourself at every single moment of that race. That if it's ever easy, then you're not going to win. I'm not going to win a race that comes down to an easy race and a sprint finish. I'm going to win a race that's everybody's exhausted by the end. So the gun goes and the pace has to be on from the start. Yeah.
And I never raced you, but watched plenty of your races, and it never looked like Greg Bennett finished a race without emptying the tank or being squeezed. That's brilliant. Greg, final few questions in the performance round. How would you describe being in the zone?
Being in the zone is a moment where you are only focused on the very one thing. Well, you're not even focused. You are doing something without having to think about it. That you find that state of flow, as Csikszentmihalyi, the famous, the state of flow, where I remember running once, going into the High V Triathlon in 2011, and it was almost my rhythm, my tempo, nothing hurt. And I remember it was almost like my brain was tapping the top of my skull. The beat of my feet landing on the ground and the movement was so perfect for that one moment. And I was free to move. It was the ultimate dance. It was this where your body works as one. And when you get to that state of flow, to get to that being in the zone, as you call it, it takes so much work. But then when you're in it, that you actually don't even realize you're in it. Yeah. But then if you can kind of self-reflect, it's like the example of being in a car trip, right? And you go for 10 hours and, wow, 2 hours just went by. That's being in the zone. It's like this moment where you're just in such a state of flow that everything's working in synchronicity, it's perfection. It's a moment of perfection. Yeah.
I think I'd prefer the zone on the run than in the car though, Greg, but that's a Greg, final question in the performance round. Now, we know that epic sessions don't make champions. A 28-year career with consistently showing up, doing something is better than nothing type approach makes champions. But what's the hardest workout you can recall in your career?
Well, there's probably... Can I give you two?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, there's the one that has been documented where I was with my old-time coach, Brett Sutton, and we were in Christchurch, New Zealand, and he said... We came into this dark, dingy gym next to the old pool that they had there before the earthquakes. And there were two treadmills side by side. And it was dark, and it was just this very cold place. And he had these two treadmills set up, and he said, look, what we're going to do today is we're going to do 35 seconds on, 25 seconds off at 22.5 kilometers an hour, 1 or 2% grade. I can't remember the grade, but I think it was 1%, until you drop. I was like, what? So jump on the treadmill, a small warm-up, and start going. 35 seconds on, and, which is basically, it was about 250 meters, I guess, if you do the math. I can't remember the math. Yeah. And then jump off, straddle, the side of the treadmill, and then go. And then so Brett walked over to the other end of the gym, and he had his newspapers all stacked up, and he started reading the newspapers, and I just kept going. And honestly, the first 70 were awful. I just, you know,
70.
Yeah, 7-0. Yeah, just never found just always felt anguished, always felt a bit of a struggle. But then you talk about hitting the zone or a state of flow, suddenly I just felt, oh, it's good. And the reason there was 2 treadmills is because one would get soaked with sweat, and so you'd jump onto the other one because it got too slippery to run on, so you jump on the other one. And then by 150, I was like, I'll do this all day. Like, I just found this zone, exactly like you talk about. There was just this. And so, 150 in, Brett puts down his newspapers and says, okay, that'll do. I'll see you at swimming at 11 or whatever. I'd gone to the point that I could just keep going and going and going. I was surprised when he said get off even. I was like, okay, well, I'll go to 200. Didn't matter at that point. But when you do the math, it ends up being about high 30s, 36, 37 kilometers worth of actual running. It was a long time in the gym, 2.5 hours of doing intervals plus the warm-up and any cool-down. But it was a huge workout, but I think that was my Olympic Games. So that was before the trials in 2000. And I think I went to a place that probably took something out of me for those trials, and I think I underperformed at the trials, and I had niggling injuries. I always had some kind of niggling injury, but I think a great story to talk about now, but I don't think it did what it should have, in terms of high performance. But yeah, that was what I did with Brett in 2000. And then for me, the session that became key for me once Laura and I started coaching ourselves was the Tuesday run. And the Tuesday run day was every Tuesday morning, 32 kilometers or 20 miles for American listeners, at 6-minute mile or 3:45k pace. And don't get me wrong, I would build to this, both distance and pace. And over the years, it became easier. But I'd do that every Tuesday, whether racing season, non-racing season. If I raced on a Sunday, I'd move it to a Thursday. But if I was racing 2 weekends back to back, I wouldn't do it. That'd be the only time I wouldn't do it. But I did it all year round, every Tuesday, and got to the point that when you know you can run 32 kilometers in under 2 hours every Tuesday, you know you can sprint a 10K. And that's where my 10K split started to get down into the low 29s. And because I knew I could just not blow up. You heard my stories earlier about 2007. But then also on that Tuesday, then I'd run an extra sort of 8 to 10K in the afternoon. So it was my marathon type day, but it was always done well. And the reason I point that one out, because I think that workout, that training was the difference maker physiologically for me in changing my winning rate. I'm not telling anybody to go out and run that hard, that fast. Understand that I would go to Noosa in January 1. The long run would be 16K, and it was 5-minute K pace, and it was murder, right? But then over the months and weeks, you'd build up to that distance and speed. And again, I was training for Olympic distance, not Ironman. It's too fast for Ironman training. I wouldn't do that for Ironman training. It's not fat metabolizing. It's a hard workout. But I put it on a Tuesday because it was the first day, hard workout day of the week. Mondays were recovery, and I always put my biggest workouts at the start of the week. And so that for me was my hardest training day, but it was every Tuesday from 2005 to 2015.
10 years of logging that consistent work, marathon really on a Tuesday, but as you say, you built up to that, but through the year, but you were always there through the year with it. Outstanding. Gosh, Greg, I want to ask you this. You're a great paragon of consistency and longevity. I've asked a few enduring athletes this that are featured performers. What are your top 3 tips for longevity, Greg?
Top 3 tips. Consistency. And I know that's a boring answer, but I think it's really important that you, something's better than nothing. I think be specific to you in what you need. And what I mean by that is don't just copy your friends, whatever they're doing. We're all individuals. Learn from yourself. Be specific. What do you need to become better? And then I think the final thing to that, and I guess it's kind of leaning on that same sort of being specific, but really focus on your strengths that mitigate your weaknesses. So I really think the great champions know how to really, really focus on their strengths. Because if you want magic to happen, you've got to, what talent do you have? Amplify it. Now, you got some weaknesses, okay, work on them too, but focus on your strengths. That's the difference maker in optimizing your life, in whatever you're doing. I don't care if that's your physical training or whatever it is. What kind of person are you? I started a podcast because I enjoy conversation, a bit like you. And I think I'm okay at conversation. I enjoy conversation. So that's a strength. All right. What are my weaknesses? Well, I'm not great at doing the audio editing. And you and I are talking pre-show. Okay, let's give that over to somebody that is good at that. And that's how you should run your life. I think there's people that are very good at your weaknesses. Delegate.
Yeah.
Focus on your strengths.
You're listening to Greg Bennett on this featured performer episode. 2002-2003 World Cup Series champion, and of course 2004 Athens Olympic Games Australian representative. If you missed last week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, it was an expert edition featuring Griffith University-based researcher on all things bone and exercise, Amy Harding, PhD. It's been a very popular episode where Amy explored the role that exercise plays in optimising our skeletal health across our lifespan. What should we be doing for our children pre-puberty, into adolescence, into adulthood, and then how do we navigate our bone health, approaching menopause and beyond, and as Amy outlined, for the blokes, approaching menopause and beyond.
There's also a chance that maybe it's never too late. If you are older and you do start exercising and doing the right kinds of activity, then maybe you can get 1, 2, 3, 4% increase in bone density even after, the age of 50. So I guess it's never too late to start exercising, even if we maintain bone density or slow the rate of loss with age.
You see, most of us neglect our skeletal health until something goes wrong, whether that's a sequelae of bone stress injuries as endurance athletes or a fall that results in unexpected fractures. So there is information in this expert edition for everyone. So jump back, episode 278. Whilst there, peruse the archives dating all the way back to Surf Lifesaving Ironman champion Ali Day as episode 1. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Greg Bennett, Australian Olympic triathlete, 2002-2003 World Cup Series champion.
Greg, every guest of the show gets asked 2 set questions. Number 1, if you could boil everything you've learned across 28 years of professional sport, 500 race starts, 100 plus wins, into one, and now your career in coaching and consulting and podcasting, but into one piece of advice to help the listener of this show perform at their physical best, what would Greg Bennett's sole piece of advice be?
It's a boring answer, and we've already touched on it. Stay consistent. Endure for one moment longer. It's this. I hate to be so boring, but I don't think there's I don't think there's any other advice to give somebody. That if you have something that you want, or you want to optimize your life, as you put it, then it will happen. But you must just keep turning up. Just keep turning up. And obviously consistency is driven by passion. So, ask yourself, am I truly, truly passionate about this? Or is this what my family and friends think is right for me? We say that with Olympians all the time, all these kids chasing Olympics. I'm like, do you really want to be an Olympian? Or is that what, your family, friends, and society really want? So be honest with yourself, and if you're passionate, then you can stay consistent. But that passion fuels the consistency, and then magic can happen.
And your passion, you've used that word a few times, Greg, your passion. Where does that come from? Like, where does Greg Bennett's passion come from?
Oh, probably stems from insecurities as a high schooler. I mean, it's like this, where do our personalities generate from? And it's kind of, for me, it's, I think, like I said, when I was a high schooler, it was this, who am I, and the big sports were rugby and rowing, and I'm this tiny kid that went to the boat shed and they made me a coxswain instead of a rower. And I'm like, I don't want to be a coxswain, but I found triathlon, and suddenly I was like, this is who I'm meant to be. I'm somebody here, or I wasn't somebody, I was a 15, 16-year-old kid, but I became known as the triathlete, and this became, and then you kind of go, you get this little bit of a pat on the back.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, I like that pat on the back. And it's kind of addictive, right? People think you're okay at something, and then you think you're okay at something. It starts to amplify, and the passion just keeps building and building. And, with whatever you do, the pats on the back are really important. And I think that's where I want to touch on something where we talked about strengths and finding your strengths. And I think we need to help each other recognize each other's strengths. And what Laura and I often do is we sit down and go, let's list off each other's strengths. So I'll tell Laura what I think she's good at. It's amazing. Even when your wife tells you what, you're good at, you go, oh, okay, I'm going to do that more now. Yeah. Now I'm more passionate about it, and we don't spend enough time. We're very good at pointing out our weaknesses to each other. Very good at that, which is terrible.
Gosh.
But recognizing a strength in one another, especially those closest to it, is so empowering. And that empowerment then helps you follow your passion. So,
gosh. Greg, profound. And finally, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what is Greg Bennett's physical challenge to listeners going to be?
What I'm enjoying lately, and it's a simple one for everybody, is finish your morning shower with 1 to 2 minutes of cold. All right. Now, and I say finish it. So you can start warm, put the soap on, you get comfortable, whatever. But then just slowly turn it to cold. And I have techniques. You put your hand in, then your wrist and your arm, and you slowly merge yourself into the shower. Sometimes I feel it's way too shocking to just slam it onto cold. I don't love that. But honestly, get it to cold. Stand in it for a couple of minutes. It's invigorating. And the science coming out on that only backs what I'm saying. It's a great way to start the day.
So Greg Bennett's cold shower physical challenge. If you take it on, you must let Greg know. And you're easy to find, please. Greg, over on social at Greg Bennett. And then, of course, you show the Greg Bennett Show, which has, started out as Be With Champions and now has morphed into the Greg Bennett Show. We all know what it stands for. It stands for pretty much the embodiment of your life, I feel, which is that consistent pursuit of excellence and getting inside what fuels top performance.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, no, I got to tell you, you're doing an outstanding job yourself. I look at your life and, well, firstly, your show. I'm not going to lie. I look at a lot what you do, and that's helped my own show, and I think you're a fantastic host. You're doing incredibly well. I don't know how you fit it all in by running a business, having 2 kids. I saw you did Ironman Cairns the other week. You're really doing great things for the sport of triathlon, but I think overall health and wellness and longevity for everybody. So somebody like yourself, you've been a great inspiration for me and everything I'm trying to do. So keep up what you're doing too, mate. I really appreciate coming on the show.
Well, Greg, thank you. I'd say iron sharpens iron. And as you say, we need to get better at encouraging each other. So that means a lot, Greg, coming from one of my junior triathlon heroes of sorts. So thank you, mate. And if we want to reach out to you, where's the best place to go?
You can reach me Instagram. People tend to use these days a fair bit, and my handle there is at the Greg Bennett Show. You can just direct message me. I'm actually pretty good at getting back to people and having conversations. I do prioritize that in the morning. My 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. is quite often just trying to get back to people. So you can reach out to me there. Twitter, I think it's just Greg Bennett Show. There's no "the" in front of it, but you can reach me there. And Facebook, I just Greg Bennett. So yeah, you can reach out to me or shoot me a note whenever anybody wants. Yeah,
brilliant. And we'll tag this up in the show notes. Greg Bennett, thank you for your contribution to the show as a featured performer, and certainly wish you all the best for 2021 and beyond.
Thanks, Brad. Really appreciate coming on, mate.
So there you have it. Now, I know you enjoyed Greg's sharings today. Talk about the highs, lows, and learnings, which epitomises this show. And Greg is such a perfect fit. Now, a couple of must-dos. Please jump over and follow Greg over at Instagram at The Greg Bennett Show, BENNETT Show. Subscribe to The Greg Bennett Show podcast. Greg is on a mission, as per the Physical Performance Show's mandate, to help people pursue and perform at their physical best. And also let Greg know what it was that you enjoyed from his share-ins. Now, if you take on the physical challenge for the week, the cold shower, maybe don't take a pic from the shower as a podsy, but take a screenshot of the episode and tag the show in at Physical Performance Show, tag Greg in at the Greg Bennett Show, and do let us know how you've gone with a physical challenge for the week. The podsies are always a whole lot of fun, so keep them coming. We'll certainly reshare those. And if you'd like to find out more about the services that Greg Bennett offers, corporate speaking or consulting, jump over to BennettEndurance.com, which is a central home for all things Greg and Laura Bennett. As Greg mentioned earlier in the show, Laura herself, a successful former professional and Olympic triathlete as well. Now, a massive thanks to the great folk who make this show possible each and every week. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, and Matthew Oldin on all things show graphic design. Thanks for those who have been sharing episodes, subscribing to the show, and leaving iTunes reviews. They are all read and all greatly appreciated. As mentioned, the Rinnie McGregor live stream is not far away. The September 4th live stream will happen between 3 and 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time or Brisbane time. But don't miss registering if you are outside of that time zone. A post-event recording will be made available. As per our former live stream events, we expect this event to be a sellout. So secure your place, $49 per person over at pogophysio.com.au/Rinnie McGregor live stream. Fueling the endurance athlete. Such important learnings. Now, if you have an injury concern, you'd like to get some feedback around, you are welcome to email me, b.beer@pogophysio.com.au. Also, always open to feedback regarding the show. We're always trying to improve and get better. Perhaps a future guest you'd like to see featured. You'll find me over on social handles at Brad_beer. A massive thanks once again to Earshot's Bluetooth headphones for their support of the show. Use the coupon code TPPS for 10% off the retail price of $167.95. If you've been considering becoming a patron of the show, then I'd encourage you, please jump over and support the production. Your support means a lot, and in return, as mentioned earlier, we'll grant you access to our live stream upcoming events and back catalogue of events as well. Our small way of saying thank you. And a huge thank you to this week's patrons, Ryan O'Neill and Raquel, for your support. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we'll all be enjoying the 2020/21 Tokyo Olympic Games at that point. So we will share with you a conversation that I recently had with specialist psychiatrist Dr. Asha Khan around all things ADHD, exercise and sport. It's a fascinating look into the signs and symptoms of a brain that experiences ADHD. When I was recording with Dr. Asha Khan, I literally felt like Dr. Khan was reading my mail, and these traits, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, are so commonly found in athletic folk. As you'll hear Dr. Khan share around, some of the biggest names in sport, such as Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps, have been able to positively channel their ADHD into incredible performances and achievements. It's a key episode for parents, athletes of all levels, so be sure to be tuning in next week to the Physical Performance Show. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.